Can you hear me? So, welcome everybody. I think this is a new stage for the .NET Zurich user group. And this first event of the year, 2023, we are doing it at FELFEL. Okay. I want to go ahead. And all right. Oh no. Yeah, you are looking at my fantastic background. And now it's better. So welcome once more to one .NET user group of Zurich session. For those of us who are online and on-site, this is the first event which is hybrid for us. We're also doing that in collaboration with GraphQL Zurich as well, which we have here Rafi, which is part of him and helping us with everything technical. And today is pretty special. We are going from organizing 2 sessions to 3 sessions, and we are changing the format. So we'll be doing fast-paced, very fast and quick and very fun. I swear of that. You can kick me if they are not fun. Sessions today, 25 minutes each. 5 minutes for questions, and then like 5 minutes for switching over to the next speaker. So today we will have C# lowering, why should I care, which in that session, Stephen will show us some Pokemon, I guess. And then we will have the state of Azure and the Swiss Microsoft communities with Manuel Meyer. And then last but not least, we will have the state of the .NET authorization, authentication, and cloud security with Damien, Bowden. Aside from that, I would like to give a special thanks to our sponsors, M&S, offering solutions, PPVal for texture, and of course, Impact Hub Zurich, the Stanford Group, and of course as well to Azure Zurich user group, which we have Manu here. Manu? Here. Yeah. And our friends from .NET Central, which are always very loved from us. They help us start it. .NET Day Switzerland and Swiss Angular, which our friend Fabian is organizing along with .NET Day Switzerland. Who are we? Well, it's me, Michael, not here. Nigel, hi. He's always there giving a hand. Rafi, sorry, I will fix that later. We have Laurent, always a member and helping always. We hope to see you again in some talks this year. I will try to push you. Yeah, it's cold, so it's good. Nice. We have Fabian, not here today. He's in another conference. This week is crazy. We have NDC, we have Angular, React. It's full of conferences. We have Mark Muller. I didn't see him, so he's always helping. And Powell. I don't know if Powell is here. Didn't see him. Yeah, didn't make it. What do? We organize events from developers to developers, share knowledge, passion, fun, and networking, including in beer and pizza back in 2019 and until basically today that we met more or less again. You can follow us in .NET Zurich, join us in LinkedIn. We have a group there, and also our meetup, and propose talks. Now we are doing that in 25 minutes, so if anybody wants to go ahead and propose a talk, I know some of my colleagues that are doing in an internal user group some sessions, so if you want to come here to the stage in person and do that in a user group, I know some people that started that and now they are in conferences, like Stephen, which is, for me, it's nice. And the agenda, so far, we start the reception. I have like 2 more minutes to go, that's why I'm talking that fast. And then we will have the welcome from FELFEL. Then Ruth and Manu will give, not you, Manu, or the Manu, will give a tour on the venue, right? And we will start more or less at 6:30 with Stephen Giesel. Then we will have the other talk after 5 minutes with the state of Azure and Swiss Microsoft communities. And the last talk of the day with Damien Bowden regarding authentication, cloud security. And finally, we will have an apéro of more or less 1 hour. and then at 9 or 9 sharp, probably they will kick us off. Maybe not. Just try. All right. So I will introduce later to the speakers. So I will do that later, and then I will give the word to Biruth. Biruth, I think he's the lead of developer teams and architect here at FELFEL.
It's about enterprise. I want to talk about it.
Okay.
You have to turn on.
Yep. Now you go. And I shut myself up.
So should I just... Oh, okay. So, thanks everyone for joining us for the first .NET meetup event of 2023, hosted by FELFEL. On behalf of our team, all of the FELFELians, I would like to give a warm welcome to you guys. And before kind of starting with the main speakers, I would like to kind of give a quick overview of what we do at FELFEL and kind of our tech team. So our tech team at FELFEL is divided in 4 sub-teams. Stephen sitting there, he's taking care of our infrastructure with Amin. We have POS and architecture team, Stefan and Pablo, yes. And I'm here, the lead enterprise team. Our team is basically the main audience, I would say, of this event. We do a lot of things in C#. We have a lot of things running in .NET. And yeah, there's 5 of us. And then there we have analytics team, which they are taking care of all the forecasting, kind of doing all the BI and analyzing our data, trying to deliver kind of more desirable food to our clients. And you might wonder, like, what would be the product of such team? To be honest, it was also a bit difficult for me to kind of describe it in few sentences, because we are really doing a wide range of products. We like starting with the POS, the fridge that you've seen outside. We are basically involved in the hardware design. We are involved with the IoT part, the connectivity, the observability part. Also, we have kind of like a public and customer-facing website that they can order, I don't know, deliveries, and they can manage their accounts. We have an app. We are managing our suppliers. And beside that, we have we are building basically our in-house management tool, like for managing all the products, suppliers, and kind of taking care of our data. Plus, we have as I said, we have a big team taking care of forecasting and kind of doing all of the BI part of the business. Plus, we even have our own custom-built warehouse solution. So, as I said, all from hardware all the way to warehouse management, all the way to kind of our custom ERP solution, basically. And as the last slide, of course, we are expanding. We are always open if you would like to have a conversation, a coffee here with us. But at the moment, we are actively looking for an IoT and system engineer. Again, as I said, it was very difficult for me to kind of describe what will be your role here. But if you're, like, you will be kind of involved in the development of our fridge application layer, hardware layer, I know, connectivity layer. So if you are interested in any of these topics, please approach us, and hopefully we can have you in our team. That's basically what I wanted to present. I think at this point, Manu, my colleague, he's going to take over, and you can see kind of, he's going to give you an office tour, and you're going to see what we actually offer, what is our product.
Perfect, thank you so much, Arush. Good evening, everyone. My name is Manuel. I'm not working in the tech team, so maybe spare your questions about technical details for later, for the networking event. we will start the office tour in front of the FELFEL. So I can show you what Birush and his team are actually doing and creating the whole day. Then we will move around once. You are welcome to ask all the other questions straight ahead, so don't be shy, I'm here to answer. So we will move out and then we start.
Hello.
Aha.
So we are starting with the next speaker, which is Steven Giesel.
Hi.
Say hi to the audience.
Hello.
He's started in our user group, and now he's speaking at international conferences. I'm proud to say he's a good friend, sadly an ex-colleague, but well,
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
who knows? And a great
Teach me
speaker, and he's really fun. And yeah, he loves animals and.
Pokemon. I do like Pokemon
Exactly.
and cats, and one of those you will see in a minute.
All right, so I leave you with Steven.
Thank you. Yeah, welcome. It's great to see people in person, not on a virtual screen like the last almost 3 years. It's also cool to get this hosted. So for the online audience, you're missing a lot, by the way. There's always food there where I'm pointing. You can't see that.
It's on, right?
It should be on. Oh? Okay. If not, then you will get complaints on YouTube. The downvote button is anyway disabled, so who knows. Okay, I have a very, very bad joke for you. Why did the developer quit this joke? He didn't get errors. With that, expectation bar directly lowered, we can segue to my topic, and it's about lowering. What is it, and why should you care? So the next 30 minutes, I hope I'm on time, we will talk about what lowering is, how you see that, how you might use that even every day without even really knowing, and what it can bring for you. Short to me, Jose introduced me really quickly. I'm Steven. I am lead architect at a company called Circle in Schlieren, mainly .NET Stack. I do have a website where also a QR code is shown that links to my website, and if I do not forget to upload my slides, please contact me somewhere. You can also contact me on GitHub, Stack Overflow, LinkedIn, but not on Twitter. That's my unique selling point. You will not find me there. There is a person with my name, but that's not me. It's an imposter. Be aware of that. Okay, a short question. That's Pikachu. I guess a lot of people know what a Pikachu is. Hopefully, otherwise my jokes will not land. And this is a for each loop. I guess whoever wrote .NET code will also know what this is. My question is what those two have in common. And the answer is quite surprising. If you lower your code and you convert your code to CIL, what does this? I will talk later. Both of them do not exist anymore. So, what is that? Why are you here? Why I'm telling you that in the first place? Well, lowering is an essential part of your compiler chain, and I want to give you a better understanding what really happens there, what your C# code is doing. You can also predict performance. You can basically tell what is faster than the other, the underlying principles, but you can also detect bugs. I will have an example later for all of those categories, so stay with me. Also, you might want to know that some of those constructs I will show and you use daily don't exist for each var log using async await, yield anonymous, lambdas, record extension, link, stack alloc, Pikachu events. The list goes on and on and on. So it seems a bit weird when I say, okay, wow, all those things, they don't really exist. What do I mean with that? I talked a lot about lowering without telling you what it is. And I still do not tell you what it is. First, I tell you what is compiling. I guess you know what it is. You have a language, and you translate this into another language. That's compiling. Normally, you do this more natively to your OS and the underlying hardware. Lowering is you take high-level features in one language and translate them to low-level features still in the same language. You might have heard of the word syntactic sugar or compiler magic, and more often than not, this describes lowering. So you have the whole C# compiler pipeline where you do semantic stuff at the beginning, you look if the syntax is valid, but then at some point when everything is right, your code will be translated into something. In most of the cases, you have this common intermediate language, and one step before that happens, your code gets lowered. And you can think of it as a synonym in the same language. Like you have the word henceforth. That sounds very high, and probably, hopefully no one uses that. Anyway, you can also say from now on. The meaning is literally the same. There's no difference. They're synonyms. That's why they're called synonyms. And you can ask yourself, okay, when I can use the same thing, why should I care? Why should the language team care, or me as a user? And the reason is simple. For you as a user, you get certain benefits. I will come to that in a second. And for the compiler team, it can do some certain optimizations. If you think of a very low-level thing like for or while loops, they are very, very easy to optimize. You might have heard of terms like loop unrolling. Loop unrolling is super trivial to do with a for loop. It's not easy with a for each loop. That just doesn't work. So if your compiler does something to make your terms easier, it can optimize your code. For you, the benefit is simple. If you think of like C# records, they were introduced in C#9, they are just a convenient way of telling, hey, I have a class which already implements IEquatable and does all the scaffolding for you. Behind the scenes, record doesn't exist. C# compiler doesn't know about record because part of the compiler will boil it down to the plain old format you are used before C#9. A lot of stuff I told you, so let's do it with examples, shall we? The easiest one is the var keyword. I do not want to advocate against or advocate for that keyword. That's up to you. That's up to your team and your decision if you want to use it or not. I know that's kind of religious, so I will not touch that thing. But if you compile your code, var doesn't exist. What the compiler does is it basically looks on the right side and sees, oh, there's a string. So my left side has to be of that type too. It's called right-hand side and left-hand side, and your left-hand side has to be of type the right-hand side. That's all that happens there. Another fancy word is type interference. That's what happens here. Easy. I guess it's kind of easy to follow. I talked about for each, and it doesn't exist, like Pokemon, unfortunately. So if we have a simple plain old array, I create this array, it has 2 elements, and then I for each over it. I just want to write it down. There's nothing really big going on here, but if you look on the right side, you have a lot of code. So on the left side, you have 3 lines, and here you have almost 10 lines. And this is my example from henceforth from now on. And the same applies here. What's going on? The first thing you might notice is, hey, the array somehow loses his collection initializer. Well, it doesn't exist. Collection initializer is something which your compiler doesn't know of. It's done before. And how it is done is simple. The compiler knows you have 2 elements. So it creates a static array of size 2. That makes sense. And also adds those elements to your array via indexer. OK, straightforward. And now the for each loop, as I said or spoiled a bit before, will be translated to a while loop. You can also think from a mental model of a for loop. So we go from 0 to however large your array is, and then we increment that counter. Fair enough. You might ask, why is there no for loop? Well, for loops also get translated to while loops. That's why you see while. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Maybe one thing is a bit special here. You have these int array2 equals array. That seems a bit odd. And the simple reason that happens is multi-threading. So you want to keep that pointer. That's the implementation detail. I guess we don't have to go into much too detailed here. OK, that's for each of an array. I guess everyone can imagine, OK, that makes sense. Array is fixed size, and I can go from the 0 element to its length. Pretty straightforward. OK, let's do the same with your plain old list. Basically, the code on the left is not much different than with the array. We have a list. There are 2 elements. Yeah, they get added there. And I write them out on the console like before with the array. Trivial. But if you look on the code on the right side, yes, there are some similarities, but it looks way different when we go a bit more into detail. OK, let's check it out. First things first. Similarities, no collection initializer. Again, doesn't exist. That's a thing your compiler does for you. That's just syntactic sugar. What he does is he adds the elements 1 by 1. So it's also not an add range. It does that 1 by 1. It's important to know. Then we have some weird enumerator. I will tell you what this is. And then we go into this while loop. And instead of using an index, we are using a method called moveNext. Sounds fancy. And as long as we can move forward, we get this element and print it to the console. This whole concept in .NET is done by the IEnumerable interface. And as the name suggests, if you are IEnumerable, you are enumerable. So you would implement that interface if you want to say, hey, I'm kind of a collection, whatever this means. Kind of a collection in the sense of, I can go from the start to the end 1 by 1. This is how we do it. So if you think of a basket full of apples, the basket full of apples is your IEnumerable. There's just a lot of elements inside. You do not necessarily know how to go from one to the other, and this is the responsible of the IEnumerator. So the IEnumerator could be, for example, you, who has an algorithm to tell, okay, I go from one apple to another until I find the apple I really, really like and want to eat, make a make a pie out of it, whatnot. It doesn't matter. So this whole concept is just an abstraction. Why does the .NET team do such weird things? And it's simple. Just imagine going through your head and think of all the collection types you know. I'll give you a second. You might think of dictionary, stack, linked list, concurrent dictionary, heap, queue, and they all behave differently. They are somehow collections because you can put multiple elements inside and outside, but the way you would go through them, you do not know. That's an implementation detail of that specific class. And IEnumerable just tells the outside how to do that. Okay, back to that example. You can see now, or it maybe hopefully makes sense, that as long as we have move next, so as long as we have an item, as long as we can go through, we do this. And move next basically sets current to the next object. If there's no object, that thing is false, and we go out of our while. I guess also trivial. Now, do you see also a try finally block? And what's a bit special here is it's just an implementation detail of IEnumerator. IEnumerator forces you to have a dispose method. And if you think of databases, that makes obviously sense, because if you go through your records somehow, you might want to dispose that connection. You don't want to keep them up all the time. That might be not good for your scaling. And scaling is a very important buzzword nowadays, so keep that in mind. And now we do a little trick, and we go a bit off topic. We're not doing anything with lowering. I want to show you crappy code you can use in production tomorrow, if you want. But first things first, we want to use a for each without IEnumerable. The things I showed you, they implemented IEnumerable. I guess everyone is fine with me and has the same opinion that a list implements IEnumerable, or dictionary implements that. But we can use certain facts from the C# language specification to do some cursed things in C#. For example, let's have a look at this beautiful code. We have a for each with a number, and then we have 2.5. Whoever is not familiar with that, this is something .NET introduced with C#9. It's called range. It's just that. So you have a starting point, you have an ending point. I guess it's trivial. That thing doesn't have an IEnumerable. If you would put that in your IDE, they would complain. Say like, okay, there's no get enumerator. What should I do here? Please implement IEnumerable. But you're sneaky. You don't do that because cool kids don't comply to conventions. So what you can do is this one. There are extension methods. I guess they're also not really new to everyone. They're there since I guess C#3 or so. And what you can do is you can use two tricks of the language specification to make that thing work. The first thing is, for each works, yes, if you have IEnumerable, but the C#3 specification says, as long as there's an appropriate getEnumerable method, you can use that. So also before C#9, you don't have to implement IEnumerable as long as those methods are part of your class. It is working. C#9 basically aligned everything and said like, okay, it's fair to have extension methods which allow getEnumerator supporting for each loops, and then you can make this work. Now, should you use it? It depends, as always. You want to be a legend in your company? Yes, use it directly tomorrow without unit tests. Go for it. If it's not that which is your target, maybe don't. The main problem with such things is, first, Yahoo, this is not really something anyone would do. And the next problem is, if you see this, just 2.5, and this is a typical problem, by the way, in C# in general, is now the 5 inclusive or not? Yeah, who knows? In this case, it wouldn't be. It's up to the to my implementation, and here it wouldn't. It's oftentimes the case in C#, or for example, math random, where the upper bound is exclusive, but the lower bound is inclusive. But no one forces you to do that. You can do whatever you want. So I don't do this. Anyway, while we are at doing really, really weird shit, we can go further. The rabbit hole is deep. Let's go one further. How about this? Would you like that? Await 2 seconds or await time spent from seconds to? Wouldn't it be great? For me, it's very verbose, isn't it? And you can also make that work. Normally time spans and whatever that construct here is not available, awaitable, obviously. You need tasks or value tasks, you might think, but that's not true. Tasks and value tasks, they don't share any interface. That also doesn't make sense because value tasks should not be boxed. But that's a bit too deep. But what they do is they have a getAwaiter method. So your compiler does no duck typing. You are not allowed as a user to use that, but your compiler does that. So to make this work, you can make also extension methods where you can do a lot of crazy stuff, and you just have a getAwaiter method, which returns a task awaiter, and this would compile. So I don't know, it's very verbose. Back on track, I was a bit showing you just shitty code I use in my private project. I'm just kidding, of course not. I would never do that. I also explained to you, you can detect bugs. Let's have a look at that code. We have some clients as a new HTTP client. Please also don't do that. Just for the sake of demonstration, that shouldn't go through a pull request. Please don't new HTTP clients all the time in every request. That's not great. And what we're doing here is we have this get string async, and we return. Seems good, or? I mean, except my meme I put there, it looks very logical. Oftentimes you might have heard, you don't have to await calls at the end of the call chain because, this is 40 nanoseconds and, 2 bytes of allocation. So why should you do that? What's the issue here? Okay, let's dissect what using is really doing. Using is just a fancy way of telling, hey, I have a try and final block. That's all. That's all using is doing. And it tries to guarantee you that your dispose method is really called. That's all the guarantee using is trying to give you. Of course, if you kill your program via task manager, you get hit by a meteor, or you plug the plug out of your PC, well, then of course it doesn't get disposed. But I guess then you have other problems, especially the meteor case. Okay, so let's have a look on the right side. A re-return, that is like before. And what happens is when you return, afterwards you finally will be called. That's just the call chain of try finally. The problem here is more with the asynchronous code. How asynchronous code works is you go in, and as soon as you hit an await, you go back to the caller, because that's what await does. You don't want to wait there. You want to give the thread or the task back to the pool. So now that we know, okay, we started the download, or whatever the URL is, and then we go back, so we are in this method. But unfortunately, we get directly disposed as object. That's not really great, is it? No, it's not. For the HTTP client, you would get an object disposed exception. In general, it's very undefined behavior, and it really depends on the implementation details. At worst, it's just undefined. So please don't do that. That's really, you shouldn't do. Okay, I have a small quiz for you. Have a look at those 2 code snippets. We have a do, which is a nullable person on the left. It's basically almost the same code. We have this pattern matching with the is keyword, also introduced in C#9. And on the right side, we have also this check. If the age is smaller than 25, return 1. Otherwise, return 10. It doesn't make sense from a domain perspective what I'm doing there, but I hope you get the point. My question into the room is, who thinks that code is equal? Raise your hand, please. No one? Yeah, that's a trick question. Huh? I wouldn't make that presentation if they're equal. That's true, they are not equal. It's pretty simple. The is pattern, or pattern matching in general, will be translated like that. So it will literally check if your objects are null, and afterward it does the check. And the cool thing is, even if you have now other complex objects which could be nullable inside your person, and you make more brackets and go down the rabbit hole, these still holds true. So this thing is null safe, where this one here on the right side, they will just throw a null pointer exception if your P is null. So you really, really don't want to do this. The cool thing is, I guess I have a few minutes time, or I have a small bonus. I didn't thought I will reach that, but we have a bonus question. And we will talk a bit anonymous functions. And for that matter, we want to capture something, so-called closures. What we're doing here, we have a list. That list has tasks where I put some console write line inside. Then I for each over that and call the action. Now the question is, what is the output of that whole thing? And you might think, okay, well, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, that's what the loop does. Obviously, of course not. I wouldn't bring this up again if this is an example. So I can bring up my browser and open that for you, because 80% of my presentation, I don't have internet, wait. 80% of my presentation is this beautiful, can't I put this here? Here, other side. Look at this. Here, look, it loaded automatically. 80% of my presentation is SharpLab.io. Someone heard of SharpLab.io? Oh, please, you have to use that. That's the best tool. So what SharpLab.io is basically is the playground of the Rust and compiler team. You can select branches here on the default, so you can even use the new C# 12 shit if you want. Like the cool kids, you see you have a lot of options here. And that thing can run your code like .NET Fiddle, and then you can see, oh, there's like 5 fives. That's not great. And I explain you in a second why. And you have this decompile C# lowering feature, what I used for my whole presentation. So if you applaud someone, please applaud that website. Not me, I just copy-pasted everything. Okay, and if you look here at this program, you can see that there's a lot of code for that small thing. The main thing you will see here in that while loop, by the way, so for loops get translated to while loop, you see it once more here, is a closure or these functions. What they do is basically they create an anonymous class behind the scenes. This is this one here with this weird name and brackets and whatnot. And the problem here is we have the reference to I. So all of our actions share the same reference to I. Of course, then what then happens is we iterate until we are like to I equals 5, and then of course delist the boards, that's why we see the 5, and then we just go through, and then we show everything. So if you use closures, be very, very careful. That's, they close over your stuff, and if your stuff is maybe a value type, then you have a reference to that value type. You will not get updated values. Yep, that's how it is. So back to the presentation. Perfect. I'm almost done. I said it already, thanks to SharpLab.io for making this presentation for me. I had to copy-paste code snippets and put them into a keynote presentation. That's all I had to do, and explain you, entertain you a bit. Pikachu had to add, that's something for sure. Yeah, thanks all to you for being here, I like that. And yeah, if you have questions, come to me later, write me.
We have a couple of minutes.
We have a couple of minutes, woo! Any questions? Yeah.
Between all of these things that you showed, which one would you say is the most dangerous one? Like in a sense that we need to know what's happening.
Okay, from my personal point of view, and I'm leaning very outwards the window right now, always await your tasks. So I often saw that not awaiting tasks is just pure danger. In 99.9%, and this is the disposable example I showed earlier, I can go with the back. Yeah, this one. Exactly this one. Await your tasks. That is the most dangerous one out of my point of view. And yes, calling await will occupy some more bytes. And yes, it will call you like 40 nanoseconds or 20 nanoseconds in modern .NET implementations. But if you don't have a stack trace or you have an exception, what is it worth if you have like 4 bytes saved? Nothing. So that would be for me, yeah. Any other question? Yes.
What would you do in order to make it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the last example?
Okay. That's a good question. Very good. I can't skip animations. That's beautiful. Okay. There are 2 things you can do. The first thing is, and this is also, by the way, new in C#9, you can write static here. So there are static lambdas. Static lambdas forbid closures. That's something you might want to use. To fix that problem, it's pretty simple. You can create a temporary variable, var a equals I, and then you just put in a. Or, and that would be probably the better fix, just give it a parameter. Your action uses just one parameter, which is of type integer, and you don't close over. So the fix, however you want to do that, there are multiple, these 2 I showed. The fix is don't use closures here. They can be really dangerous. They can also be especially dangerous if you close over this keyword, because that forbids the garbage collector to scrap off your stuff. So this in a closure can be very, very dangerous. Any other questions? Perfect, then I would like to close on time. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. So now we are going to set up the next speaker. Okay, you know everything. You want me to put it, or?
Yeah, you can put it. I don't know where's the best place.
Yeah, wherever it does not scratch. I will start it already. You can put.
Thank you.
Oh, I like the laptop.
Yeah, it looks like a
That's
spaceship.
cool. You use these?
Sometimes.
Nice. We are
Not
live, by
very
the way, so everybody's hearing what we say.
Yeah, that's fine.
So, quite on time?
Let me quickly check my first
Yes.
slide. Okay.
Cool. Beautiful. I like the picture. It's very nice. So next we have Manuel Meyer. He's, to me, one of the reference in Swiss community. He's also an MVP and an expert in everything Azure. Expert, teacher, professional. Here you have solved way, way more issues than probably a lot of people in
More than
Switzerland.
Microsoft.
I trust you on that because I had some interesting contacts with their technical support. But that aside, he's to me a referent. I met him like 2-3 years ago, or maybe more. And since then, we are collaborating in the user group. We are supporting their events. So he's one of the leading organizers of 2 of the biggest events, but I'll let you speak about that. Last year was really fantastic to be able to help him. He's always in need of people to support. So if you want to do some community work, his events and that of Fabian Gosbring, they are really worth attending, either as a speaker, right, or as a helper, like I was last time. That said, I would really like to thank you because of your fantastic support to the .NET user group.
You're welcome.
And that said, the stage is yours.
Thank you. So welcome everybody. I think Jose put it perfectly and said everything, so have a nice evening, I'm going. No, I'm just kidding. I'm Manu, I'm one of the founders and half of the organizers of the Azure Zurich user group and a couple of other events that I will get into. So Jose asked me to speak here, and of course I said yes, sure, no problem. Thought in the back of my head, that's only in 4 weeks, so that's a problem for next month, Manu. And then I realized, oh shit, it's already in 2 days. And so I'm standing here now. And it was interesting because what happened is very interesting. But maybe we start with a little survey. So who of you has never done anything with the Azure cloud? And I don't mean M365 or Teams, but really creating resources, deploying anything to the Azure cloud. Who has never touched it? A couple of people. Who works with the Azure cloud every day? Very nice, but maybe not yesterday. Okay, so I want to speak about 4 things. The first one is the state of Azure. That's the topic of my presentation. The second one is the current state of Azure Switzerland, because that's especially interesting for us, because most of us, I assume, we work for Swiss companies, we have Swiss customers, so what's going on in Switzerland is especially interesting. Then why, in my opinion, I think the Azure cloud is the best cloud platform we have in Switzerland. We will look at the opinion of Microsoft first, and then I will tell you what I think about it. And the last point, I will speak about the user groups in Switzerland and the events, and I have a little hidden announcement there. Maybe you already know what's going on, but I will tell you. So yesterday, when I prepared the presentation, I thought, oh, well, what's the state of Azure? And it looked pretty bad, looked about like this. So yesterday in the morning, nothing worked. Teams was not available. I think even GitHub was not available. I couldn't log into the Azure portal. At one point, even the status page about the status of Azure was not available, so that was kind of a really big disaster. I had customers calling me and complaining, and it was terrible. And I discussed it with Damien before, because we always say, oh, the cloud is really cool, and it always works. And it's sometimes good to get this reality check that it doesn't work always. And this can be really bad for your business, of course. So what happened? Here's a tweet from Azure support. It really took some time until Microsoft published a statement that the stuff is not working. And what was kind of special yesterday was that really nothing was working, because the problem that they published, it was for all the regions across the globe. So it wasn't only affecting the United States or Switzerland, it was really everything was down because there was a problem with the network. We can see it very nicely here. So these are the complaints that have been submitted, or the issues reported to the Down Detector website. And we really see that at 8 in the morning, all hell broke loose. And a bit of a bad situation is this one, because Microsoft announced a couple of days ago that they fired like 10,000 people. Because everybody else did, like all the big companies in the United States did it, so Microsoft did it as well, and everybody was like, oh, you fired 10,000 people and your cloud breaks down exactly a couple of days after that happened. So that's some really bad publicity for Microsoft. But we will find out what has been going on. Officially, it was a deployment concerning the virtual WAN infrastructure that spans the globe that was somehow messed up and broke everything. Okay, let's speak about the good stuff. If Azure is running, what do we get in Switzerland? I borrowed these slides from Microsoft, and I will give my comment to those. So Microsoft figured out these quite impressive numbers, 3, 200, and 20,000. What does it mean? It means the cloud has been in Switzerland, the Azure cloud has been in Switzerland for 3 years, a little more. It means there are more than 200 services available now, and there are 20,000 customers running their workloads in the Swiss data centers. So that's pretty interesting, and in terms of progress and established cloud provider, Microsoft has been the first one, and therefore has a lot of experience and is just a little bit ahead of the competition. These are a couple of customers that are running stuff on the Swiss Azure cloud, some big ones, some small ones. We will go into some of the details later on. This is the official list. There are many unofficial ones, obviously, but these are the ones that are communicated. The unique value proposition from Microsoft for the Swiss Azure cloud are two things. One is that they have just been the first one, so they had a couple of years to build up the services, and everyone who started later has a hard time catching up. And the second one is that they have 2 data centers in Switzerland. I have to say 2 regions to use the Microsoft slang. One in the north in Zurich and one in the west in Geneva. But what's important to keep in mind, or maybe first what this means is it's possible to build solutions with disaster recovery in a different region without leaving Switzerland. So this is quite a good value proposition. What has to be kept in mind is that Switzerland West is a restricted region. So if you go to the Azure portal today, it's not possible to deploy to Switzerland West. You have to open a service ticket and tell them, oh, we are a super important customer, we want to run stuff there, and then you can. And even then it's restricted. So many of the services we have in Switzerland North are not and will never be available in Switzerland West. So it's really only to be used for disaster recovery failover scenarios. So these are the 2 points that I say, and I think these are valid. Let's look at the workloads. So what has been coming in Switzerland that's new? I will not go into all the details. I don't know, Databox is pretty cool, where you can ship hard drives to the cloud. Purview has quite the hype, text-to-speech and speech-to-text with Schweizerdeutsch, with Leni. I still have to see a serious application using it. But to be honest, I saw one because on my phone, using certain social media applications, I get advertisements for stuff that only grown-up people get. So just to be clear. And I have seen some of them using the Laney voice. So it was like advertising pornography, to be honest, but in Swiss German. And I thought, that's Laney. I know that voice. That's sexy. That's really sexy. And a couple of more services. Let's move on. Machine learning. One very big thing, very big announcement is Azure Confidential Computing. We'll get into that in a second. What else? Yeah, that's about it. Another type of VM to use. Here's a list of all the services that have been around in the Azure cloud in Switzerland during the last 3.5 years. Another important point is confidential computing. What does confidential computing mean? We had for a very long time in Azure that data is encrypted at rest. So whenever you store anything in Azure storage or in a service that uses Azure storage, it's always encrypted. It's not possible to store a document that's not encrypted in storage, which means that if someone theoretically would pull out a hard drive from the data center, which wouldn't make sense at all, but the person wouldn't be able to encrypt the data, to decrypt the data. And the second one is data in transit, so sending data from one machine to another one using HTTPS uses encryption as well. But we always had the issue that the data in use, so the data that's in the memory that's used by the CPU, is not encrypted. Because if it would be encrypted, the CPU couldn't read it. It's kind of a problem. And the solution to this is confidential computing, which is specialized hardware using Intel technology that ensures that even the data that is in the memory and used by the CPU is encrypted. So it's kind of I think you could say it's a game changer. And Microsoft has it very high on the agenda for Switzerland. We even got it before other regions such as Germany or France. It has a very large potential for new stuff, such as data clean rooms, which I never heard of a week before. But that's a big new thing that's coming. And I'm going to give you an example or some more information later. What else? We have availability zones. So in Azure, they have the concept that within a region, so in Switzerland North, we have different data centers. And you can think of them as like different buildings that are separated inside a region. And if one building burns down or has a problem, the other one is not affected. So we can build workloads now that we distribute over different availability zones. So if there's a partial outage in the region, our workload is still running in the other building, so to speak. And that has been announced, I think, for the beginning of last year. Took them some more time, but by the end of last year, we have it available now in Switzerland because Microsoft announced they will roll it out to every major Azure region around the world. That's one thing we don't have in Switzerland West. For example, in Switzerland West, we don't have and will never have availability zones because it's just thought of as a backup or a disaster recovery region. Okay, then another cool thing, Microsoft has figured out with a lot of brainpower that there are certain industries that are kind of sensitive and hesitant when it comes to cloud computing. And there are 3 important ones. Financial services is one, the public sector is one, and healthcare is one. And what Microsoft did is they tried to help these industries in kind of reducing the fear of the cloud. And I think this is a very important point, because this is one thing that's not related directly to the technical stuff, to the technical cloud platform, which is awesome, but this is guidance that can be used to build solutions, even in industries that are kind of old school and hesitant when it comes to innovation, modernization, and cloud computing. And we'll get into this topic in a second. So the question is, why do I think Azure is the leading cloud platform in Switzerland? And it's exactly these things for the 3 different industries. So we're going to take a look. What does Microsoft give us? For the public sector, we have a couple of interesting documents. We have two cloud design documents for the public sector. One is about Azure itself, and the other one is about Microsoft 365. So if you have customers or work in the public sector, a lot of the groundwork is already done by Microsoft. So you can pull out these documents. They are really long PDF documents that go into Switzerland-specific stuff like regulations, how Microsoft deals with the authorities, what the Bundesrat has to say to cloud computing, and so on. I added all the links to the presentation, so if you're interested, you can check them out. Then we have Der Weg in die Cloud for the public sector, which is kind of a guideline how a public entity should approach cloud computing. And a couple of years back, this wasn't even thought of. So all the clients said, oh, no, we are in the public sector, we don't do cloud computing. All the hospitals said, oh, no, we're a hospital, we don't do cloud computing. But now things have changed. And now we see more and more adoption from even really sensitive customers. Then there's another one, public sector cloud design. And we have templates for risk analysis, for example. That's one thing that's really important for all of these companies. And Microsoft gives them the guidance to go through this risk analysis. It follows the ISO standard, and they can then decide if they should do cloud computing and what workloads they should or should not be moving into the cloud. Contains a lot of good images. It's, I mean, for the technical people, they always kind of knew that cloud computing could be an option, even for sensitive data or sensitive industries. But the documents here, they address basically the difference, the discrepancy between the technical people and the management, and try to help there. There's a white paper for Cloud and Behörden that contains the legal challenges in Switzerland, so it's very specific. It has a huge Q&A. For example, what happens to my data? When do you submit my data to the United States? What happens in legal cases, and so on. And it contains information very specific to the data protection laws from the Bund and from the cantons. Let's look at the next industry, which is healthcare, which is super sensitive because I don't want my health data leaking out somewhere. They have acquired some interesting use cases. You will find the links as well in the presentation. Luzerner Kantonsspital, they do low-tech computing, which is not Azure in the sense that I speak of Azure, but it's more power apps and stuff like this. We have Kantonsspital Bowden with a health assistant that's based in the Azure cloud. And we have Zuger Kantonsspital with a patient communication solution. And for all of those, they have published reference cases where you can look at what are the services they used, what did they build. Then it's time to meet this guy. Who has heard this name before? Nobody? Good. David Rosenthal is a lawyer, and he published some very interesting documents. One is this one here, Leitfaden zur Einführung von Cloud Services in öffentlichen Organen und Schweizer Spitälern. So how to use cloud services in the hospital. I think the second part here, the öffentliche Organen, the public sector, it has just been added to hit two flies at the same time. But that's a document that's public. You can look at it, and it's really nice. It looks like this. I think they only picked him because he has a super fancy lawyer name. And if you read that name, you think, oh, his father has been a lawyer and his grandfather. But it's not true because he actually was a developer and a technical guy before, and now he's the super data protection Swiss lawyer. At least since he doesn't work for Microsoft, but he works with Microsoft. What he provides as well is a risk assessment application in a super big Excel document that you can fill in. It will give you the different points you have to look at, make a risk analysis, and can help you to decide if your company should and what they should move into the cloud. For financial services, there are plenty of customers, so I'm not going through all of them. What I see in my work, I mean the big ones, UBS, Zurich, and Swiss Re, they have been on Azure forever in Switzerland. What I see now is that we get a lot of Kantonalbanken, for example, that are moving into the cloud. These are the ones that are public or have announced it. Maybe you have seen the announcement from ZKB. It was very big all over the news that they are now using M365 and basically embrace cloud computing. And it all started here. It started in 2018 when the FINMA, the financial regulator for Switzerland that regulates the banks and the insurance companies, even the Krankenkassen, published this document. It's called Circular 2018/3, and it's about outsourcing stuff. And it was that time when they clarified that cloud computing is just outsourcing. So to the regulator, it doesn't really matter if you use the hoster from the other side of town or if you move to the cloud. It's outsourcing. And with outsourcing come responsibilities. So many people thought at that time that the FINMA just tells Swiss banks, you're not able to use cloud computing. You're not allowed to. It's forbidden by the law. But that was never the case. But the FINMA says, if you outsource your data into the cloud, you have to know what you're doing. You have to know what data, where is it stored, how long does it live, who has access to it, and so on. And this kind of kicked off the whole financial services moving into the Azure cloud. And what they published as well, or what Microsoft published, is a compliance checklist for financial institutions. It was in 2021 for the bank, where the bank could really decide if and what they can do with the cloud. Link is in the presentation as well. There's another tool, the Microsoft Service Trust Portal, that contains these documents and describes how Microsoft and the FINMA have worked together. And this is very unique because the other competitors like AWS and Google, they are just starting now. And Microsoft is quite ahead of these two. Here are all the links if you want to get into the details. The same guy, Rosenthal again, published Swiss Banks in the Cloud. This is how it works and how it doesn't work. An interesting piece. And yeah, if you need a lawyer, this is your guy. Okay, let's speak about the user groups in Switzerland when it comes to Azure. So I compiled a list here. We have a pretty substantial user group in Bern, the Azure Bern user group. We have the one I'm organizing with my colleague in Zurich. We have one in Basel. We have the Cognitive Services and Bot Framework user group. They kind of have the problem that they just picked two topics and they are really hot some years and not so hot anymore the other years. And we can just do anything we want as long as it's somehow related to Azure. And we have the Azure Professional Work Group. So if you're interested, check those out. No matter where you come from, there will always be a user group for you that speaks about Azure. Upcoming events. I have two events that are coming that could be interesting for you. The first one is this one here. It's called Azure Bootcamp Switzerland. We organize it for I think for the fourth time. It's a full-day Azure conference. We have 4 tracks of Azure sessions. We have a keynote that's not published yet that will be about the data clean rooms that I mentioned before. So there is a really cool startup in Zurich. They are building a product that provides customers with a data clean room that sits on top of confidential computing. The idea of the data clean room is that you always know what is my data and who do I share it with. And it's always encrypted, always secured, from rest to transit to in use. The Azure Bootcamp is going to happen at the 11th of May this year in Bern at Welle 7. We have a call for sessions now, so if you want to speak or know someone who wants to speak, it goes till the end of the month. You can find everything at azurebootcamp.ch. It's a non-profit community conference. Non-profit means it's basically free, but we still charge $25 because we don't want people to get a ticket and then not show up. And community means it's not organized by a company. It's organized by the 2 user groups from Bern and Zurich. Tickets will open on the 11th of February. Good. The other conference, that's the announcement. Has anybody of you attended the .NET conference last year with Scott Hanselman, John Romero, and Richard Campbell as a speaker? A couple of guys. That's very good. I'm, of course, speaking of .NET Day Switzerland, the only .NET conference we have in Switzerland, as far as I know. And the announcement is that it's going to come back. And this year, on the 29th of August, we will do .NET Day Switzerland for the 5th time.
Nothing scheduled on August 29th.
Yes, there is .NET Day Switzerland. And yeah, that's it. Tickets are not available yet. You can sign up to the newsletter at .netday.ch. It's basically the same as the Azure Bootcamp, only it's not free. And we have a couple of more famous speakers that we fly in from overseas. It will happen in the Arena Cinema again in Zurich. We'll have popcorn and beer and everything you like at the cinema. So these are the 2 events. I hope to see you there. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I will
You're
also
welcome.
add probably they are open to anybody that wants to help at these events. So any volunteering work is really welcome,
That's
right?
true.
And I don't know what they call for speakers. I think it's open still. Probably it's sessionized.
For .NET Day, we have not opened it yet. Can you help me?
Yes.
It will open someday during the next weeks. For Azure Bootcamp, it's going until the end of the month. But if you have a super topic, want to speak, just get in touch. You can find me. My email address is not there, but you can find me on LinkedIn or on any other platform. And yeah, just drop me a message.
Thank you so much. All right, now we are going to set up the next speaker. All right. Very well. I set you up here. I hope it does not scratch.
That's all right.
Let me put that here. Yeah, that's better. I start it up so everybody will hear you now. So, what can I say about Damien? He's on security, authentication. He's also a very, very avid open source writer. So he has created a lot of open source projects in security authentication. And yeah, he's also a known speaker around here. He works at iSolutions. And I would add that he's also preparing a very, very interesting workshop on authentication and authorization. He has a 2-day workshop, which is preparing. I know you didn't want to sell it, but I mean, you took the effort to be here, so at least I can help you to promote it a bit. I saw it a bit, we discussed it, and it's pretty, pretty cool. If you are curious on that, just get to him, Damien Bowden, in LinkedIn or Twitter. I think you are there. The only person here which is not on Twitter is Steven.
I'm not watching Twitter anymore either. I'm killing it.
So, something I forgot to say about Steven, you can find him in GitHub. He's definitely there, very active. All right, stage is yours.
Okay, so hello everyone. Thanks, Jose, for that. My name is Damien Bowden. What I do daily is I work in a company called iSolutions in Bern. We have a team of 55 developers, and we deliver solutions, projects, more business value for customers. So we're focused, iSolutions is a much bigger company, but my little department is we're focused on bringing enterprise solutions, whatever you need for your company. So my job as well, I'm focused on security. I do a lot of security workshops now. I do security consulting, and then I also help internal, external people improve the security in .NET applications, Azure, whatever you need. I do an awful lot of Azure as well. So I've only got half an hour today, so in security is a pretty big topic, so we can't really discuss much in half an hour. So what I thought is I'd focus today on what's happening at the moment in .NET in our world, what's new, what's exciting in security, and maybe it's things that you could roll out in your own companies that's be really interesting in the future. So at the moment, there's an awful lot of things happening in .NET at the moment this year. It's very interesting. What's happening in OpenID Connect, Auth, the two standards is pretty much all modern security is built upon, even the Azure solutions, but they rename everything. FIDO2 and passkeys is actually, that's something really exciting. I think that everyone should learn what that is. Self-sovereign identity for Switzerland is becoming really important now. So at the 2025-26, we're going to have a new Swiss identity. So I'll just explain a little bit how that will work and where you can find docs for that. And of course, some security recommendations where I think is best practice. You don't have to follow it, but I think it's good. So in .NET 7, .NET 8, there's an awful big push at the moment from the ASP.NET Core team. What they're doing is now they're trying to make it easier for developers who don't really understand security to use security solutions without making mistakes. So what's the problem? That we have too many solutions, and we have too many of these one-line solutions which say one line of code and your security is finished. But the problem is that security is, there's so many different setups, so many different wrappers, and everyone does it different. So we have a bit of a mess at the moment in .NET, or when you're connecting an Angular application or Azure Functions app or whatever you're doing, every solution needs a different security solution. So what they're trying to do this year is figure out actually what's the main type of solutions we need for .NET, and they're doing a big push. And at the start of November, .NET 8, I expect to see an awful lot of new templates which will be focused on implementing a MSAL or a Microsoft Identity solution or Auth or OpenID Connect solution for your type of needs. So there's an awful lot of work going on in Graph API at the moment as well, Microsoft Graph API. So there'll be an awful lot, there's new solutions or templates coming, but they're not actually changing much in .NET, because the .NET solutions are excellent actually. It's just that the APIs are too low level and most people don't understand them. So what they're trying to do is put another type of contracts or layers on top of it, will make it easier for the non-security person to understand it. But I think security suffers at the moment in .NET because everyone is fighting against each other. Each company, Auth want to do it their way. They have their own client library. Microsoft has their client library. They rename everything. They don't follow the standards. So what's happening is, no matter what type of security product you're using, they have a different client library and it never matches to the next one, and people get confused what they're doing. But if you go a layer underneath to understand it, which flows, where do I use what, it's actually much easier. It's not actually that complicated. There's only a few things you need to know. So a big thing is, in the moment, if you want to start learn the basic flows in OpenID Connect. That's always for user flows, or OAuth is when you have no user, or you can use them both together. So at the moment, this year, there's an awful lot of new standards coming out. For example, if you're working in banking or in insurance, there's a new FATB specifications of OpenID Connect, which is really exciting. The really best practice how to implement the high security, modern security for banks, insurance companies, and so on. There's also really exciting protocols, RFCs coming in there, Auth 0 or Auth. I keep saying Auth 0, I get mixed up here. Most of these things are exciting if you're interested, but we don't need to know them too much because we use a library which implements them for us normally, and then you just need to know which ones to use. So I picked out two things that's important coming this year, which is a type of a trend which is happening. Does anyone recognize what type of security pattern this is now? Has anyone used this yet? No? Yeah, you got it. So BFF is actually what's recommended now for web single-page applications. So you should get rid of the cookies, or use cookies now and get rid of tokens from single-page applications. That's what's recommended now. Now, most people still don't do it because it's complicated. The big problem is that using tokens in the browser, it's really hard to keep it safe because you're using JavaScript to access the browser to get the tokens, and then it gets easy to steal it or whatever. It's very hard to keep your tokens secure in the browser. And since same site is introduced, it's much easier now to protect your session if you use the cookies. So the new setup is that you don't have two applications. You have your single-page application, which is not a single-page application, but a view for your back-end application. And then it's one security context. So with that, then you secure the whole application. And behind this API, you could put more APIs, your microservice, whatever big daemons you have behind in your backends. But the idea is now that you try and do one security solution with backend for front and use a cookie, and all the security is implemented in the trusted backend. So you can keep secrets, and then you can also implement the high security implementations. So this is actually what's recommended, and this is getting rolled out now. And we'll see more and more people move into this. Microsoft haven't moved this way because they're still pushing tokens and WASM and all this stuff in the front end. But they're getting there. I've seen the first implementations now where they've actually done a BFF implementation. So we'll see over the next couple of months, most people move into this pattern. So tokens in the browser is at the moment dead again. But not in native applications, not mobile applications, because they're able to secure tokens securely. So if you're doing web applications with user interaction, always try to do a trusted backend now, and you use cookies to secure it. That's what's coming, and the new best practice till next year maybe. Another thing that's really important that's coming now is, this is a bit older, is Pixie, the Proof Key of Code Exchange. I took this from the RFC. If you're using the recommended flow now for user interactions or the OAuth, the OpenID Connect code flow. And with that then, people used to say, if I have a confidential client or a trusted backend, trusted client, I don't need Pixie, and that's not correct. You use Pixie everywhere. So any implementation you see where I'm using OAuth code flow, which you don't use anymore, you use OpenID Connect code flow for user interaction, you should also use Pixie as well with a confidential client. So this is the new best practice. So if you see an old IDP or your company forcing you to use an OAuth flow or the OpenID Connect flow without the Pixie, don't use it. And if it's not possible to switch to Pixie and code flow now, you're probably better off using the OpenID Connect hybrid flow code ID token. And with that flow then, you don't need Pixie because you have a C hash in the ID token which protects against the same type of attack. People say I'm using Pixie, I don't need to have a confidential client. You should always validate and authorize your client as well if possible. So this should be used everywhere for user interaction flows if you're using the OpenID Connect code flow. Something I think this is one of my favorite topics now is what's coming this year and it's getting really big now is FIDO and passkeys. Does anyone know what FIDO is? Or should I say, who's not using it yet? So you should be using it. This is the future of authentication now, especially with passkeys. The biggest problem we have now is one of the main problems with authentication is that we cannot protect against phishing. And phishing is a massive problem now. And if you're using FIDO in your enterprises at home or passkeys now, passkeys are getting rolled out at the moment, you'll never fall for a phishing attack. There's no known phishing attack which is possible using FIDO 2 or passkeys now at the moment. Passkeys is not yet, it's coming, but it's not fully out. But FIDO 2 is now in the field for a long time. So what is FIDO 2 and why is it so good? So FIDO 2 is a little key. There's different types of keys to produce different little bit of hardware, and they use public-private key encryption or pairs. What you can do is then that with this, you don't need to have passwords, and then you have this, I'll show the flow after, you have a flow where it's not possible that you can do a phishing attack. So me as a dumb user, it doesn't matter what links I click as emails, I go to a website, if it's a phishing website, the FIDO 2 will protect me. Because it's not fair to expect your users not to fall for phishing attacks. That's bad practice. We should not roll out any security solutions like that anymore. So just to say for me, it's really important, FIDO 2 is awesome. Always use it if possible and stop using those authenticator apps. This is just a pain. Every time you change your phone, you have to update half the apps. Authenticator apps should go away and SMS is anyway gone. So how does FIDO work and why is it so good? Or why is it protected against phishing? So on the client browser side, we have WebAuthn protocol and every browser supports this now. So what happens is that we have a server, we create a challenge to the server, it creates a challenge, it goes back to the browser where the client is, the client goes to the CTAP and it comes back to your hardware and does the full steps. So you have 3 steps, you have the server, client, hardware and back. And because we're controlling the origin and we're using public-private key encryption to do the whole round trip, it's not possible to remove this page and put in my phishing website in between. There's no known phishing attacks which have succeeded yet against FIDO at the moment. It could come later, but at the moment it's not possible. And FIDO is pretty much supported by nearly all the big service providers. So if you're implementing your own OpenID Connect server, ASP.NET or Core Identity, it's really simple to implement the FIDO solution for you. Or if you do it in Azure, Azure have a really fantastic FIDO solution already in Azure AD. Azure B2C is way behind, it doesn't have it yet. Auth0 has FIDO 2, Salesforce has FIDO, nearly all of them support FIDO 2 now. And what's really cool about FIDO 2 is now they've extended the protocols to add support for passkeys. So Apple, Microsoft, and Google have come together, and they've made an extension of FIDO 2 now, which is called passkeys, which makes it really usable and easy to, how you say, I have my Apple device, and then I want to share my FIDO keys. It generates a passkey, puts it on the other device me using a near-device communication protocol with Bluetooth. And with that, then, I can actually share my passkeys through the Apple accounts or AirLock, whatever I'm using. And then on the other device, then I have a secure login, which is phishing safe. So I don't need passwords anymore, and it's also user-friendly. So this is the future of authentication. So where does it stand in the pyramid? So passwords are useless on their own. Rotation of passwords is the worst. So when anyone's rotating the passwords, it's really a big sin. You should be ashamed of yourself. Then passwords is not as bad as that. SMS is way, way, way better, but SMS is too easy to break into SMS or rob SMS accounts or ring up the providers. So we no longer recommend SMS that you should use this anymore. Authenticators are much more safer, but I don't recommend this anymore as well because everyone knows that we change our mobile phone every 2 years and it's absolutely a nightmare. With half the mobile accounts, you have to replace them. You cannot have the backup, you haven't logged into this account and you have to re-register. Authenticators are just not user-friendly, and I don't recommend it, and authenticators do not protect against phishing. This is a bit of a marketing scam that a lot of the big companies do. If you're using an authenticator, it's not phishing secure. Even if you have your location and this on it, you can still hack that. You can still use a VPN and do my phishing site on the other side with a VPN. Authenticators do not protect against phishing. So anywhere you're doing cross-device authentication, you have a problem. And then top of the list then, of course, is FIDO. It protects against most of the known attacks for the authentication flows. So try to use phishing secure logins everywhere. You can use certificates as well, but certificates are hard to use in browsers. This is what I recommend now everywhere, and it's actually pretty user-friendly. It's just say you have a company with 100 people, you get everyone 2 security keys, that's $80 per person, and then you have no more phishing in your company. So it's actually a cheap investment to remove an awful lot of problems from your company. So everyone should be rolling this out, and I expect FIDO to get really big because with passkeys coming in the next 6 months, a year, all consumers, especially the Apple consumers, will only have a chance to download an iOS 16. All consumers will have passkeys, and once the consumer market has the secure phishing login, it's going to be horrible to come back to work, and you have to use these unsecure 2F MFAs or whatever. Like, coming to work at the moment, you have to log in 3 times with MFA, A, B, C, and it's actually horrible. So just like FIDO is cool, just everyone knows that. Another big movement at the moment, especially in Switzerland, is self-sovereign identity. Has anyone heard of that yet? So in Switzerland, there's a new thing called the Swiss EID, which is coming out, and the BIT are type of rolling this out now, and they're implementing a new Switzerland digital identity, and it's going to be implemented using the self-sovereign identity. So every person living in Switzerland will have a chance to have a wallet, a mobile wallet, and they'll be able to go around. You could do your business with your Bund or your canton, and you can use this then to identify yourself, so you don't need to do any online checks. So you have a really easy way to identify yourself, and you control your own data. So I'll explain it a bit better later. So what is a digital identity? Does anyone know what your identity is? Like, what is an identity of a person? So just say, what's Jose's identity? And it's actually not what he thinks it is of himself. It's actually what we think of him. So he's an MVP in some circles, and people say, oh, that's Jose the MVP. Other people, his mother and father, would see him as Jose, their kid, a different thing. Then you have your friends that you didn't meet since 20 years. They have a picture of you the way you were 20 years ago. That's another identity. And all of these different pictures of you makes up your identity. And digital identity is the same thing. You have Google account, you have your employee account, you have your counter, you have your darknet account, and you have your whatever else you have. You have all these different accounts, and all of this together is your identity, your digital identity. And with your digital identity then, we have no control over it because it goes to Google. They tell me, if they say you're no longer allowed to log into Google, you lose your Gmail, you lose your Google identity part. And the idea with digital identity, with self-sovereign identity, is you take control of it and I control my identity. So how does that work? So I took this picture from the BIT. This is what they're rolling out in Switzerland. So the way it works, you have an issue, a credential holder, and you have the verifier. So Switzerland is producing their own digital wallet, so everyone on the mobile phone will have a Swiss wallet. And on this wallet then, the Swiss will produce a thing called your digital ID, EID, with a verifiable credential. And this credential then you can go to the passport office and you'll be able to install your digital identity on your passport once you've proved that who you are, you showed your passport, whatever. And then I get my ID on my wallet. So I can go around then with my wallet. I think I have one here. Microsoft, you can use the Authenticate app from Microsoft. You'll have your ID on your wallet then. And the idea is then, this wallet belongs to you, and then you have to, of course, authenticate in the wallet. It's not clear how this is going to work yet, but it should work. And then if I want to do a business, by saying I want to buy a GA by the SPB, I can just log into SPB. They say to give me a verification presentation, and then I get a QR code I can scan. I scan the code, and I give them my credentials, not the government. I say you can have my credentials. Once I give my consent, they get my credentials. You don't have to give them all, only what you decide to give. And then this is per law then what I give them enough for an online identification that they can actually do the business with me without actually having to go to SPB, show your ID, and then come back. You can actually do everything online. So there's an awful lot of new use cases. For example, I can set up a bank without actually having to send in my passport or do the online checks you do now. You can kill all those expensive processes, or you don't have to always go there. So there's an awful lot of new use cases going to happen with the digital identities. What Switzerland are building, they're building a ledger for the credential issuers and the issuers, or the ledgers here. They're going to build a Swiss-made ledger, which has the trust, and then you have all the trusts here. That's a blockchain layer. They're building an issuer. That's where you get your passports office, probably. They have some type of credential issue for EID. Anyone can produce their own issuers as well. Yet every company can do this if you use the same standard. And then they're building a Swiss wallet. And then the verifiers is all the applications that will use it. So this is all happening in 25 plus. They're making the POC at the moment. Come 26 maybe, everyone will be able to use it hopefully. So I say plus 25. And the thing is, a law in Switzerland takes years to make. And they're saying that if there's no blocks, that everything runs really smoothly, the law will be finished in the start of 25. But if people do a referendum, then it'll get another 10 months back, so it could be 26 before it becomes law. And before the law happens, you cannot use the solution. So we expect the first rollout to be sometime 2025, 26. So what is at the moment? So they've built a legacy Hyperledger's Iris solution. So this solution, what they built now, is not usable. And this is what they built the new Swiss wallet on. Then I think it took a German company. I'm not sure how they built the Swiss wallet, but they're based on a product from a different company, I think. But I don't know. This is not very clear. It's not public. Problems, though, there's an awful lot of problems here. It's unknown what type of verifiable credentials will be used. So can you imagine this credential that I give from your company to the other company? What type of format does it have? How do I do the encryption? How does this do? And there's 10, maybe 20 different specifications, and everyone does it different, so you have no interoperability. It's not clear what type of verifiable credential will be used. Of course, the way of communicating is DCOM v1, v2, and SIOP. V1 is dead now. V2 and SIOP are two completely separate ways of doing the authentication, the communication, I should say. And SIOP offers a super solution because it's integrated with OpenID Connect, and then you can do an authentication with that. DCOM is just communication between two layers, but it's really secure. You cannot break it. One of the biggest problems from Switzerland's going to have is the over-credential theft problem. And I don't know how they're going to solve this, because just say, you know how like SPB brought out the, you can buy tickets online now. They ask for your date of birth. Why did they ask for your date of birth? They do not need this information. So if the SPB asked me your date of birth, even if they don't need it, before we could buy a ticket without showing your date of birth, and now you have to give your date of birth to get a ticket, otherwise you can't buy a ticket online. It makes no sense. They don't need the information, but they want the information because it's valuable. So just say every person in Switzerland is walking around with EID, which is authenticated and validated from the Swiss government. This data is really good. So if I'm setting up a shop, I will of course ask for all your data and then I'll sell it on to China, unless you force me not to do it. So you're going to have to need some protection. And if every person in this room, if I say, if you want to buy this, I'll give you this for 2 francs, just give me all your data, nearly everyone will click, yeah, that's fine. Most people give their data away freely anyway. So there's an awful lot of problem with credential theft, and we need to stop that. And the only way I've seen it is blocking it. You know how we do with the AHA phone number, where you say if you use that, you have to do a process to give it over. They'll have to make some type of law for that to stop people just giving away their credentials freely. Another problem is it's less secure than existing systems. They always say it's brilliant, we don't need passwords anymore. But like we've solved that problem already. And they have no solution for phishing. It's a wallet and you scan a QR code, and anytime you scan a QR code, it's unsecure. You never trust any QR codes. So it's less secure than the systems that we already have. And a huge big problem is this actually it's more complex than the existing solutions. Everyone says it's super easy, you can just connect here, connect in, that's it. But everyone's built in using a ledger, and the ledger is built on top of a blockchain, and some of the blockchains is born on the planet, but that's a different thing. The whole problem we have is actually that you have to use a ledger, and if you were to implement your own ledger yourself, that's really complex to do all these calls back and forth to the blockchain. So it's more complex to use it, and we'll be forced to use a product from someone else to pay money, and they'll be taking our passwords and sharing them. We don't know how they work. We don't know how professional the companies are. But there is some good solutions. For example, Trinsic have brought on a new good solution. It's a good company that's doing it. Or Microsoft have they don't have self-sovereign identity, but they have verifiable credentials with Azure ID, and that's a fantastic solution. So if you want to get started with this, maybe use the SAOP with Microsoft Azure ID verifiable credentials. That's a really easy way and really professional way of getting started. Then you have another super thing is that a big problem actually is every producer of self-sovereign identity solutions, it does not work with the other company. Remember the early days of Auth that we implemented one Auth and then we got the next one and it never works together. So everyone had their own specific solution. And we're in the same stage here at the moment that if you implement with HyperIR's ledgers and then you try to do a Microsoft SAOP or you try to do a company X, Y, none of them work together. I can't use the wallet A to B, I can't do an export, import. There's absolutely no interoperability. Now they're trying to make it better, but it's really far away. So you really have a vendor lockdown here. That's a big problem at the moment. But that will get solved. It's not most of these problems are solvable, except I don't know how they're going to solve the over-consent problem. That's a hard thing to solve, actually. So it's really important. Self-sovereign identity is not a good solution for authentication. So if someone says it's super authentication, we don't need passwords, that's not correct. It's worse than what we have. It's not a good solution for authentication. It really is a good solution for online identity. So if you can authenticate correctly, and then you use that to identify yourself with the EID, that's a fantastic solution. Now there is an RFC or they're writing on a protocol where they're going to integrate FIDO2 together with with SSE, and that would actually be a fantastic solution because the FIDO provides the authentication and then you can use the EID for your online identity. So together it would make actually a good solution. Another really thing is cross-device authentication that starts from a QR code is always unsecure. So anytime you scan a QR code, you should be scared. Last week, the Bowden actually brought out information that people are actually taking their online bills. They swap out your QR code with their QR code and then they send it on to you. You pay the money to my account, not to where you wanted to go. And everything looks good because you don't know what's behind the QR code. So you should never do any authentication which starts from a QR code. It's always unsecure. Now there is one exception, and that's with passkeys. And why is passkey secure from a QR code? And the difference is that's not cross-device, that's near-device. So what happens in the passkey is they use a Bluetooth communication from your browser using WebRTN, and it goes to Bluetooth then, and it goes to your hardware, and then it comes back from the other device to yours then. So scanning this QR code is actually not cross-device, but near-device. And then you're actually using the same browser. So a big problem is it's always saying self-sovereign identity is cool, you can just scan a QR code and it can prove that I'm 18 and I can buy beer. You know, the typical use case to sell it. But it's not possible because if I was a kid, the first thing I do is I say, listen, you're 18, can you scan my code for me because I need to get some beer. This is typical, the kids are smart that way. And then just to finish up now, have I got time actually? Yeah. So some best practice, things I recommend. So does anyone recognize this type of picture, the old way of securing your solutions? You have a super Kubernetes cluster, whatever you're using. You put a big firewall around it and everyone's happy. So you don't do that anymore. That's just bad practice. That's just old. And I know people do it because their architecture is too complicated or it's too hard to secure it. And you build with the Kubernetes and, oh crap, I forgot the HBS and I can't do it. I would just put a firewall in front. Firewalls are not the way to secure your solutions. You always secure it at the source. But firewalls are good. So it's really important. I always say network security versus application security, which is more important, which is not. And it's the wrong question. You should always do both. And a solution that prevents you doing one or the other is bad. So if you have a firewall and to say behind the firewall we have HTTP, that's a really bad solution. You don't do that. Or you say from one microservice to the other microservice we don't protect. Very bad idea. You don't do that. What you do is you have to do security properly on both systems. And if one says you cannot do the other, then it's a bad solution. So you always protect the applications at the source of the applications. So you should always, as a developer, implement it, you should always do it properly at the application. And then if you do network security on top of that, that's great as well. It's an extra layer. So if one of them makes a mistake, you're still protected. It's really important. So no boundaries. Authentication is actually the new boundary. So this is really important as well. Good security is never complex. So if you find yourself building a complex software, you've already killed your security more or less, because how can you do security in something that you don't understand? So if you find your developers doing microarchitecture, big complex systems, or using CQRS for a web API call or something like that, maybe someone should tell them maybe you don't need all that. keep it simple, keep it stupid. Try and keep your application simple again. Do you know this curve where the developers start off, they're learning, and then they suddenly think they're brilliant, and then they start doing DDD, and they start doing SQL REST, and they're adding this for every solution, and eventually they come back to the normal life again, and then they make simple solutions again. Security works better if you keep your solutions simple, and it has to be usable. If a security is not usable, you know that you log in, MFA, log in again, next to MFA, log in MFA, that's just a pain. And then what will happen is you'll find the back door and you'll introduce a little back door into your solution and everyone uses that then. Complex security solutions which really are not a usable solution, will become really quickly really unsecure. A good solution has to be easy to use. This is very important. Always use HTTPS in development as well. This is important. I see so many Angular developers or React developers doing HTTP. I actually still see sites deployed with HTTP. You don't do any development or you don't do anything in HTTP. Everywhere from start to end is HTTPS now. So anytime you set up a dev environment, do a HTTPS solution. If you're behind your firewall in your Kubernetes cloud, it's HTTPS as well. I know it's a pain to set up, but you should do it. Otherwise, you should not use Kubernetes, or maybe you shouldn't use it anyway. You should never use setups, I've already said that. Implement security at the app. So just say you have 6 or 7 microservices. Each app should protect itself fully on its own. So from one app to the other app, I cannot just go in. I have to show my token, I have to do my authentication, authorizations for the UI, whatever. But you always protect at the source. So this is really important. You never move the security to a gateway, to an API manager, to somewhere else, the front door. You can do it as well. This extra layer is super, but never on its own. The security is always implemented at the source. This is zero trust strategy. So zero trust is actually the new way of doing modern security. It's a strategy, it's not an architecture. And it's really important that you actually, every application you implement, the security is implemented on the application direct. Now, you don't have to implement it, you just have to use it. This is also important. Always use standards. Do not implement it yourself. So we have a tendency as developers, I can do it better as them. And then you implement a username password to get an access token, which is totally madness. But I still see when I go to a company, they're doing a username password and an access token. It makes no sense. You should never do it. So always just use the best practice, because most of the best practices have come from people that made the mistakes before you. So if you just use their libraries or use the certified libraries, you don't have to make the same mistakes as they made before, and then you don't fall in for these little security holes. So especially if you don't really know what you're doing, just use whatever the big companies, the big packages recommend, and don't implement it yourself. Just take a client library for that. One that works, our correct one, not from Stack Overflow. Then this is really important, although yesterday was a big downer for me. Actually, it's really hard to think. Don't implement on-prem security anymore. This is a bit of a controversial. You should always move your solutions now to the cloud. It's actually more secure and better in the long term to do security and do your applications in the cloud now. So why do I say that? The big problem with on-prem solutions is usually it's complicated to implement security. The solutions get big. And then at the moment you understand everything. At the moment it's best practice. You do it correctly. 5 years later, it's an awful expensive to get rid of it. You've lost the 3 or 4 devs that implement. They went to the other company. No one's there that understands the solution anymore. And then to migrate to a modern security on-prem, it gets really expensive. And then you have all these legacy solutions. You see this in the banks and the insurance companies a lot. They have really horrible legacy old solutions which are no longer secure, but they cannot migrate away from it because it's so complex. So what you do there, you just put a firewall again in front of it or something. That's the easy fix. But that's why I say nowadays, because the big problem we have nowadays in the industry, we don't find good developers, or we don't find people that can implement, deploy, we don't find people that can maintain it. So we're better off actually going to the cloud straight away. And then we say, yeah, but it's in the cloud. I don't know where it's hosted, it's dangerous. But the hardware you have in your basement or wherever you stay on your local Swiss cloud, it's also made by the same companies that you're putting the software in the cloud. So it's actually not any less safe. So if you want to get professional or modern, you should not actually ever implement any on-prem solutions anymore. And you still see some of the cantonal solutions saying we have to deploy it locally. And they're implementing these old monsters which just have a different UI. Maybe it's Angular now, but it's the exact same code as before for 10 years, 15 years ago. It's not actually any better. So you have to move away from this on-prem to modern securities because it's the only way to maintain it. We can't afford it. We don't have enough money to keep learning, employing. The developers are not there anymore. This is actually really important as well. We should never implement a username password again. That should be just disappear from every head. It just doesn't exist. Especially if you're doing a client implementation. If you're doing an OAuth, the OpenID Connect client, you do not implement username password. Now, if you do need to implement your own identity provider, then use ASP.NET the core identity, and then put underneath it OpenID Dict or Identity Server underneath if you're doing it on .NET. If you're doing it in Java, Keycloak is a fantastic solution. If you're using a cloud solution, use Azure AD or Auth0. Azure B2C, it works, but it's not really the best. It doesn't support FIDO. That's a big problem there. And an awful lot of the security protocols are not actually very actual in Azure B2C. But it's still a good solution for public cloud-facing solutions. Don't mind, actually. I use it a lot as well. And you say it's not the highest, it's not high security, but it's enough for what I need. And I say the risk there is you can measure it. So what my favorite one is actually Azure AD, Auth0 I like an awful lot. And OpenID Dict and Identity Server, I use them both a lot. And Keycloak everyone uses anyway, because that's what the whole of the Swiss cantonals and BIT use. Keycloak is actually very good. They have all the modern security and FATB and supported, Cyber supported. They have FIDO too as well. Yeah, these are the ones I recommend. So if you find yourself in code, implement a username, password, and an access token, or you're just doing a standalone application, then use a FIDO key implementation at least, if you're going to do it. But you don't need that anymore, because if you have a username, password, someone in your database, then I can just open up your database and Robert, you'll lose it eventually. Everyone loses the database eventually. So try and avoid using name passwords now. And even if you're doing your own identity provider, then use FIDO keys. So that's what I think is important coming up for the next 6 months, 12 months. There's an awful lot of things changing, but each one of these topics as well, it goes into more detail. There's an awful lot to learn. In fact, there's so many exciting things happening in Azure at the moment as well, which I didn't have time to talk about. And then, of course, how to implement these security solutions or how you do it in .NET. There's so many little things, how to mix them together, using two IDBs together. Everyone has at least two IDBs in every company now. You have to bring them together. You have to have protocols to exchange tokens. It's actually really cool. So if people want to learn security, then just buzz me. I'll show you where to get started. And if you do it, it's actually great fun, and then you'll always be busy. So that's all I wanted to say. If you have any questions or any info or anything you'd like to extend, just buzz me then. Does anyone have any questions? Yep.
You talked about many topics,
yep.
security related, except IoT. I was wondering if any of these things that you talked about, like to what extent they actually apply to IoT devices.
Okay, so IoT devices, you have no user. So I was focusing more on web applications and user. With IoT, you don't have a user. So you're using certificates, so you're using a different way to exchange this handshakes. Because you have to be secure, get the IoT on the device and then back. And then the second thing is, when you have your IoT device, an awful lot of user interfaces, you have to still have a user login. That's one of the big problems. How do you do that? So actually what we're trying to do now is we're trying to give the users FIDO keys. You open up a browser, or you can do a cross-device the device flow. And with the device flow, you can still have a user log into your UI, but then you cannot save anything securely in a small device. That's the problem. Anything on that device is robbable. So let's say with a mobile, it's a public device, so you cannot do it. So if you're doing user interaction, you have to use a login with device flow. Or if you're doing just the device has to communicate back to the Azure ERT hub or whatever you're using, you have to use a certificate to connect it. And then the whole thing is, there's many different problems. How do you get the certificate on the device? How do you update the device? How do you get the device back up? You have communication in both directions. And there is the EOT Edge communication works really well, or you have MQTT. There's an awful lot of really good protocols out there. So if I said you want to learn that, get started. There's different places, but actually the Azure Docs for EOT Hub is actually a pretty good place to get started, and they go through some of the basic protocols, what to use, what not to use. And then if you see the names, then you can start using those specifications and move on to other producers. So it's a whole area for itself again, but most of it is built upon certificates, private public keys. And then of course you need your own PKE solution, and you build your whole chain from that. Actually, it's good fun. Yep.
You mentioned this FIDO2, obviously as the most secure one. A lot of folks are moving more on mobile, and I was wondering with mobile banking,
Yep.
is there the possibility to plug in the FIDO on the smartphone?
Yeah, some of the brand new security solutions from banks are using FIDO, but most of them are still based on PKI solutions where they have a certificate, and it's just as safe as a FIDO2 key because it's a public-private key connection, and then you have your private key stored somewhere on your TPN, your mobile device, and then it connects in whatever to the public key, which you save in the public server. So you have a phishing-resistant secure login from your mobile device with modern bank applications, not all of them. Revolut is terrible, some but good solutions do have that protection already in using certificates, but certificates are made by me solution from the banks, and that's really expensive. And now you can just use a standard protocol to do the same thing. So maybe I'd be hoping the banks will move away from the made by me solution certificates and use a standard which is just as safe, and then it's cheaper to implement, because in Switzerland, for example, the new card, the Swiss ID, will have a FIDO key integrated soon. So people will walk around, your modern new mobile phones will have FIDO keys in them as well. So every Swiss person that has a bit of electronic device or card will be walking around with 2 public-private key certificate generators in their pocket. So why not reuse it? And that's the thing, it will make cheaper solutions then. But it's not any less secure, those good solutions from the banks. The bad solutions are less secure. So, you know, if you put in your username and password directly in it, that's terrible. That's like they're handling the password on the mobile device, and then it's open to impersonation and phishing as well. Yep.
Question. What hardware provider would you trust for a FIDO2 solution? Like, for example, you were showing this, I think it's YubiKey.
I have the YubiKey here, yeah. I've no really opinion. I've used the FETI, and I think they're great keys, but I don't know how trustworthy they are. To me, they look great. YubiKey is more or less what I always use for most of them. And then if I'm rolling out in a company, I'm saying that to recommend the whole company change to a FIDO2 solution instead of using the Authenticate app, then I usually just say just buy 2 FIDO keys. And then there's different layers. When you're rolling out in the company, you have your basic user that was not important, and you have your IT people that they need a higher level of security, and then you have your public people in your company that we're trying to attack. So usually the higher you go up, the more risk go, and then I say the more you should go off biometric keys or whatever.
Yeah, because you need really to trust the hardware provider, right? Because they can put whatever in there.
Yes, but it's the way the standard is made is actually, you can validate as well. If they implement the specifications correctly, it's not possible to provide it to Robert either, but it's hardware. I don't make it, I don't know. I just hope for the best. It's still better than password, or it's still better than Authenticate apps.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Yo.
Yes, in your personal opinion, do you think the government is going to make it work with the IT? Because they're not really famous for big IT projects. Or do you help them?
They do it themselves. I don't know. It looks good. The first POCs is starting to work. I've seen proof of concepts from different counties. Canton Argo made a good POC. Canton Vaud had a good solution. There's already this solution. They're trying to build an existing technology, but it's full of problems. So the problems will hopefully over the next 10 years after the first rollout, and with an awful lot of extra costs, get solved. Because most of them are solvable. The only problem I don't think is solvable is this consent theft. I don't know how they're going to solve that. They'll have to make a law for that. But the rest of the stuff I think they will be successful, and it will come. And I really believe now that we'll be able to go into a passport office soon, show your passport or get your new passport, and then you'll also get a digital identity, and then you'll be able to use that to do any type of business with the Bund or with the cantons. If it goes into the public sector, I don't know. That's another layer. Because then you have to be able to implement a trusted verifier and a trusted credential issuer, and I don't know how adaptable or how easy it will be for the private sector to implement that. We'll see, but I really believe that the cantons and the BIT eventually will have this, if the law gets passed, of course, because they have to make the law, and then maybe the people do a referendum, and then maybe it gets kicked out, or we don't know how that's going to happen. We'll see. It's going to be exciting. But they're building the tech solution at the moment as well. And if anyone wants to get involved and see what the government is doing, they have a public meeting every month where you can join, and they give you up the latest information, what's happening, where they're going. Well, an awful lot is about the business and the law, but they also go into little pockets of technical details as well. But there's an awful lot of lobby in the market as usual, because an awful lot of companies think if I can build a wallet, I have a monopoly on the wallet, and then everyone has to pay me every year for that and stuff like that. So you can make loads of money if you get in now.
All right.
Any other questions? Yeah.
What happens when I lose my FIDO key, for example?
Okay, so FIDO key is not that dangerous to lose because on your FIDO key you have a public-private key. And just say I was to rob it or you lose it. If I was to try and guess it, there's 2 things on it. You have a pin on the default, and then I have 8 chances to guess the pin. And I can use letters or numbers, and if I guess your pin, that's if it's 1 to 3,000 or 30,000 the chance I can guess it. If I know your website you're using and I guess your pin correctly, then I can take over your account. But the chance of that is really small. I have to know your pin. So just say that's not enough for you. For example, the typical, I'm in the train and I give them my PIN and you look it over my shoulder and then you have to rub my key and then you have my account. So the way you do it is that you can do a biometric authentication and it stays on the device. So I have biometric keys that's in my bag there. So it knows my fingerprint or whatever, and only I can use the FIDO key then for this account. So even if you were to rob it or lose it, it doesn't matter, you cannot use it because you don't have my biometrics. And all the biometric stuff stays on the key. It doesn't actually leave it. I don't actually send it on the server. The second factor, third factor as well as possible is on the key. So losing your FIDO keys doesn't matter because the only thing that's saved on the public domain is the public key from that pair, and the private key, the only place that exists is on the key. So for me, with pins, the risk is almost none. With biometric, the risk is none.
Damien, also you can have a master key or do a duplicate and keep it at home all the time, right?
That's if the other case. You always have, for every account, I'm not sure if I understood the question, every account I always register at least 2 keys. Because the thing is, just say you lose your key and then you use SMS to fall back, then you're not actually very secure because the SMS is weak. And then, so the backup is the second FIDO key. So for every FIDO account I log into, I have 2 FIDO keys. So I have 3 most of my accounts. So if I lose one, I still have 2 access. So it's no problem to lose it. There is flows, technical solutions.
But where is stored the second
key? You register the key on your account, and then once it's registered on your account, then if you use any one of those keys, you can log in then with the biometric or with the PIN. Okay, so.
Yeah, what's the question about it's 2-factor because it's something that you know and something that you have. So with this FIDO key,
or something that you are. There's 3 factors possible, yeah.
So you kind of lose this.
No, 2 factors on the key. So something that you know is the PIN, something that you have is the key. And then something that you are could be the biometric. So you have 3 factors in one authentication. So you don't need to do the 3 steps. You already have your 3-factor authentication. But nothing leaves the key. That's the beauty. The public key it doesn't matter if I lose that. It's worthless. It's only to produce the challenge that comes back and forth. Someone else want a question? I see the hand. No. So any other questions, sir? So if you want to get into security, then just ping me and then I'll help you. If you want to do security workshops or you want to focus more on .NET or how to implement that and roll out, then just give me a call. Or if you want me to analyze stuff for you as well. That's what I think is great fun. So I recommend everyone start doing security. It's cool. Okay, so thanks for listening, and then hopefully you'll have a beer with us after.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thanks a lot, Damien. That was really great. We are going now to close, but I will ask Steven and you, Manu, to come to the stage. And I think the speeches today have been really, really well prepared, and this deserves, well, kind of applause. So, thank you so much. Cool. That's it. We are looking forward to the next user group event. We'll probably do it at the beginning of March, and we are looking for a venue at the moment. So, yeah, if anybody is listening and sees that or are curious or in the audience, we're looking. So thank you so much and have a nice evening. So we can close the stream.